Hey everyone, David here. So this is a review I've been anticipating for a while because it is for a game that I've been anticipating for a while. In fact, this is one of the few games I promised myself I was gonna get day one in 2015. Batman Arkham Knight is the other one, and I might just get Battlefront, Star Wars Battlefront, because I was planning on getting Uncharted 4, but then that got pushed to 2016. And then there were rumors that Kingdom Hearts 3 was gonna come out later this year, but then some leaked information stated that that's probably going to come in February of 2016. So I'm thinking about getting Star Wars Battlefront as my fall game, but I'm not going to lie, there's a couple of details that have been revealed about that game that have me a little worried. But let's just focus on the now. So go ahead and stop looking at that photo of Jared Leto's new album cover and sit back and relax to watch my new review of Mortal Kombat X. And the special thing about Mortal Kombat X is that it's essentially ushering a new generation, not just because it's the 10th game in the series, and also because it happens to be the first one on the next generation of consoles, for now at least, but also because its story mode ushers in a new generation of fighters to foil the evil plans of the magician Shinnok and stop him from conquering Earthrealm. So for a while now, they were pushing the story mode of Mortal Kombat X quite heavily with its marketing material. They would release an awful lot of trailers saying that we're going to bring you guys this story that has a new generation of fighters that is going to make things feel a little bit different and new and fresh, considering that this is Mortal Kombat X, you know, brand new decade of Mortal Kombat. And that's something that I really did like about the story mode for Mortal Kombat. Just like the previous two games that NetherRealm has tackled, whether it be the last Mortal Kombat game or even the last game that they did, which was Injustice Gods Among Us, we're given this story mode that is rather lengthy for a fighting game. It's not necessarily lengthy for a game at all, but for a fighting game, clocking in at about 3.5 hours, I think that's very substantial. And again, what I liked the most about it is that it brought us this new generation of fighters that had some good chemistry with one another. I actually believe that these guys can actually hold their own. I didn't feel like any of them were weak or were very obnoxious, and I didn't really like them. I wanted to see them succeed and to work with one another. I felt like that was a good way for people that haven't been into the Mortal Kombat games to feel just like these characters, like, oh hey, you know, you guys are absorbing the existence of other realms and magicians and witches and these reptilian people and all these different races. Well, these gamers that have never played Mortal Kombat before will feel just at home with these characters because they feel essentially the same thing. And personally, I feel like that's a new way to look at these characters and to see them embrace this world and learn, just like the previous combatants did as well when they were given the task of winning the Mortal Kombat tournament. And speaking of those previous combatants, some, and I mean some because without going into spoilers, let's just say that there's a few that didn't really make it out alive at the end of the last Mortal Kombat game. And the story mode for this game continues that legacy, that story, keeps the continuity going by having the ones that were left alive at the end of the last Mortal Kombat game come back here, only jumping the clock 20 years later because we're ushering this new generation, so obviously the past combatants are going to be older now. And what I liked about it is that not just their new appearance making them look aged and making us look back at the series and go, man, look how far this series has gone, but also because the characters kind of realize that they're past their prime, so they have to look to these new generation of fighters to ultimately save the world. And I kind of felt right there with them. But hey, if you think that I'm looking way too much into this game, don't, because even though I like those things, make no mistake, this is still a Mortal Kombat game, therefore this is still a Mortal Kombat story. Meaning there's moments that go a little over the top, that are kind of cheesy, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, so expect those moments to happen. They just don't happen as frequently as they did in the past games because this game realizes that it's trying to go for a much more edgy and cinematic approach, so therefore it holds itself back. But still, we got Kenshi talking very morally about things in a very overdramatic way, or at least characters like Kenshi, mainly if they're ninjas or wizards or stuff like that, like Raiden, however you pronounce his name. And then you got Johnny Cage, who's still being Johnny Cage, even 20 years older. And being that it is a Mortal Kombat story, it's not without its problems. I felt like the story got a little too convoluted in the middle because there was this civil war happening in this other realm, and that kind of ties into why the amulet is roaming about, and I just felt like one of those things could have been cut, and we could have had a much more straightforward story. But then again, that's also a little bit detrimental to the plot because it's one of the things that I was complaining about with Shinnok. I felt like he was a little bit of a bland villain. In fact, his origin story is kind of bland. It's him being locked away and then coming back for his revenge. They don't even bother to explain how he came back. I mean, they do, but then they overlook it, and I'm like, no, wait, go back to that. How did he break out? And why exactly is he extracting his revenge? I mean, what's his motivation? He just came across as a very cookie-cutter villain that is just out there to take over Earthrealm, and that's it. And it's just an obstacle for our heroes to overcome and to stop, and essentially that's what the villain is here to do in this game. And I felt like that was a bit of a missed opportunity. I will tell you though, without going into spoilers, there is an end credit scene. Yes, video games have end credit scenes now. After the first portion of the end credits that show all these, statues of the characters and whatnot, there's an end credit scene that I found way more fascinating than the actual ending of the game. The ending itself, it's not that bad, but this end credit scene might just undo the complaint that I had about this villain. Should we be getting a certain villain in the third Mortal Kombat game, or at least the third one in these new reboots of Mortal Kombat games for this new generation? Should there be another one in a good 4 or 5 years? I would love for them to actually take the end credit scene of this game's story mode and actually flesh it out and make it into the story for the new one, because that would be great. I'm really looking forward to that. However, these nitpicks about the actual writing in the story mode pales in comparison to the one complaint I have with not just the story mode, but probably the game itself. I'm not even kidding. Nothing else in the game made me even remotely as frustrated as I was with this. QuickTime events. There are QuickTime event segments in the story mode for Mortal Kombat. Why? These things just perplexed me beyond belief. Because here's the deal. First of all, it feels like almost every game that comes out these days, no matter what genre they're in, has to have a QuickTime event. I mean, games that are supposed to be like a point-and-click adventure like The Walking Dead, or even, let's say, Heavy Rain, or Beyond Two Souls, which rely on QuickTime events. They're fine because they know what they are. All right, they stick with that formula throughout the entire game. Okay, in these these sections of QuickTime events, characters interact with one another in battles and fights, and you have to press the button prompt that appears at the correct moment to execute a move and progress in that segment of the game. Gee, that's, very captivating, except for one problem. It's a fucking fighting game! Okay? Why can't I just have my characters actually fight? Why can't I actually just fight the opponent? Instead, you have a little button appear on the screen, and it says, oh, press that, and then you have your character throw a punch, and then the person you're fighting blocks it, or you have to block the punch. Why are you doing that, okay? And these usually happen right after a cutscene. I'd rather have more cutscene than these really pointless QuickTime events that you could have easily just not done and saved your assets to improve other parts about the game. Okay, guys, NetherRealms, you guys, I know you're smarter than this. Now, I know that the last game, Injustice Gods Among Us, had QuickTime events, but at least they tried with that last game. Because from what I can tell, the last generation of version of Injustice, they tried mixing in the button prompts with like the control sticks. They threw in different buttons, that kind of thing, and they made it go by fast so that there was a sense of urgency. Like, okay, you have to press this button, blah 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 blah. And then on the PS4 version, they actually programmed the QuickTime events to the touchpad in the middle of the controller. So I'm like, okay, at least they're using that. They don't even try with these. You literally got just one button appearing on the screen, and you have to press it. They don't bother to throw in other buttons at the same time. They don't bother to throw in the bumpers or the control sticks. It's just one button, and you press it. And it gets worse. It gets worse. The window of time that you're given to press this button is huge, therefore eliminating any kind of challenge. Okay? Me, I would press the button and the characters were still in slow motion for like a good like 2 seconds before the action was actually executed. Really, you guys can't even get that right? Like I said, I'd rather take more cutscenes, which is saying a lot because the cutscenes in this game are actually rather lengthy than any of these pointless QuickTime events. And it's probably my biggest complaint about the game overall. Now, being this is the essential Mortal Kombat game to own on the newest generation of consoles, they're obviously going to take advantage of those consoles and make sure that this game looks amazing. And it really does. I couldn't really get over how polished the game looked and how solid it looked and very cinematic, whether it be in the cutscenes and how in the way that they're framed and executed, but mainly the lighting. I think the lighting stole the show for me in this game because there's scenes where sure, it may not be the smoothest or the most realistic or the closest to those pre-rendered CG cutscenes that we've seen developers pump out there prior to the release of a game to get you excited for the game, only to realize that when you play it, it doesn't really look like that. And they kind of did that with Mortal Kombat. Remember that first trailer where Scorpion and Sub-Zero fought each other, and it looked just cinematic. It doesn't look completely like that, but very, very close. I mean, there's multiple areas in the game, in terms of how it looks, that you look at and go, yeah, that couldn't have definitely been possible in the last generation of consoles. So much so that, I gotta be honest, I know I'm gonna sound very skeptical and kind of negative, but I really do not see the PS3 or Xbox 360 versions of the game coming out. I mean, I know they got delayed until what, like June or something, or maybe May or June. And if they do come out, that's great. You know, people who can't afford a PS4 or an Xbox One just yet can play the game still and experience the core mechanics of the game still without the visual aesthetic that you get out of the PS4 and Xbox One. But I wouldn't be necessarily surprised if those versions of the game don't come out at all, because it looks like they put all of their effort into making this game look amazing, and it really, really does. From the character models to the lighting to the environments, everything looks top notch, and just it just took my breath away by how amazing it looked and how the lighting just changes and reflects off of your character. I know it's I'm kind of fanboying here, but it really did look really, really great. And I also appreciated the cleaner interface, because being that this is a new generation of Mortal Kombat, they're going for this sleeker, much edgier look, so you don't have the very cartoony interface that you had like in the last Mortal Kombat game. Like, for example, when it says Fatality in the last game, it would be like a blood looking type of font where it looks like a blood splatter. I'm sorry. But here, it's just a simple font that says Fatality in red, and that's it. And also, when you're actually fighting each other, you got the bars at the top, and all you see are two white lines. And whenever you inflict damage, they go down. Whereas in the last game, it was like a green health bar, very reminiscent of classic video games. So I appreciated that new interface. It looks sleek and new and very appropriate for the game. And the thing that I loved the most is something that I actually complained about in Injustice, where we had characters interacting with one another prior to the fights in the single fight section of the game, but they wouldn't talk to one another like they were acknowledging each other. Like, I would pit Batman against the Joker, and they would just say the same thing that they would always say. I mean, it's Batman versus the Joker. They should have at least programmed these characters to say something different, because it's Batman versus the Joker. You would have them say something rather iconic. Well, they actually took some notes and made that happen here in Mortal Kombat X, because almost every single time you fight somebody in any mode of the game, the two characters will actually address each other in a personalized fashion that they won't talk to with any other character. And I think that's rather awesome. It's a really cool little detail that they got right within this game. The character designs also look very, very good. Some more than others, but for the most part, I like almost all of them. I mean, the aged characters, like I said, look rather nice. I like how they gave them details like wrinkles or gray hair, and again, it takes me back to how far the series has come to this point. And I also liked the design for the women in this game. I'm gonna sound like a feminist here, which I kind of really am, so deal with it. But I really appreciated how realistically they portrayed the women in this game, because if you guys remember it in the last Mortal Kombat game, almost every single female character in that game had a ginormous bosom and, you know, a curvaceous figure that really emphasized the ass and the thighs and everything. You guys remembered that alternate costume for Melina? Yeah, okay, don't get me wrong, it was nice to look at, but then when you come back to reality, you look at it and go, yeah, this is also going to make us look like sexist pigs, which we're already having trouble trying to get rid of that stereotype for us male gamers in this particular age bracket, so this doesn't really help. So I appreciated that the women in this game look a little bit more realistic. I mean, sure, Kitana and Melina still have some somewhat skimpy outfits, and characters like Jackie Briggs and Cassie Cage that have some suggestive details here and there, but they still look realistic. You look at them and be like, okay, you know, this doesn't look over-the-top hypersexualized like they did in that last Mortal Kombat game, and I really appreciated that. But of course, that doesn't necessarily mean that the presentation for this game is perfect. There's a wonky animation here and there, especially when your character's like coming back from being knocked down within the gameplay, and for some reason they move in a weird way because of the next move that was executed by either you or the opponent. So moments like that are bound to happen within this game, as great as the graphics may be. And also, some character designs look a little bit better than others, like I stated before. Hell, some characters are simply just better than others, okay? People are going to have a very different and subjective viewpoint about the character roster in this game. Some people are going to look at it and be like, oh my god, that's bullshit. And then others are going to look at it and be like, okay, I'm fine with it. For the most part, I'm in the category of being fine with the roster, for the most part. There's a couple of characters that I can easily take out, like Ferrator. I don't know, there's something about Ferrator that I just don't like, especially Farah herself. She's like a little punk. I mean, I just want to, like, you know, I want her to suffer the same thing that Tor suffers through. Because whenever you do something really bad and gruesome to Ferrator, the only one who actually takes it is Tor. Farah just, like, disappears. Why? Because she's a kid. Apparently that's the only line that the people over at NetherRealm are not going to cross. After showing you the digestive system with this game, they're not going to cross the line of having that be inflicted on a child, apparently. Okay. Whatever. Alright, David, just talk about the gameplay already, okay? Okay, I know that essentially is all that Mortal Kombat X is about, essentially. The gameplay. How is it, how does it feel to play as these characters, these very empowered characters, and just fighting each other to the very gory and very satisfying death? Well, let me go ahead and tell you. If you've played Mortal Kombat before, they bring back essentially the core system of Mortal Kombat once again in Mortal Kombat X. You got the same back and forth punch and kick combo system combined with throws, x-rays, brutalities, and fatalities that you've come to know and love from Mortal Kombat. But of course, being that this is a brand new game that's ushering this new generation, like I keep stating, there's going to be some brand new features that you've never seen before in prior Mortal Kombat games that they test out in this new one. And most of them, actually practically all of them, I really did enjoy. I didn't necessarily love them, but they were refreshing enough to keep the series alive. And I feel like if they keep doing stuff like this, where in every game they actually try to make things new, I dig that. Instead of rehashing the same thing over and over every single year, Call of Duty. First of all, one of the big things that Ed Boon keeps pushing with this game are the character variations. Every single character on the roster for this game has 3 variations to them, meaning they're, you know, you take the amount of characters that you got in this game and then multiply them by 3, and that's kind of technically how many characters you got in this game. Say for example, Raiden here, he has 3 variations, where in each variation of himself, he has a unique fighting style, and he also has a unique power that he uses in that specific variation. And I can't remember Raiden's, but let's say a character like, let's say Scorpion. There's a variation where he uses his swords, and then there's another variation where he uses a demon apparition to use in combat. And then there's another one where he uses his abilities to summon a fire around him to be able to ward off his opponent. And that's really cool because it makes you think of who, you know, if you have a favorite, well, now you need to decide which variation is going to be your favorite. I mean, you have 3 variations, and now you need to use all of them in order to figure out, okay, can I handle this character? If Scorpion is your favorite character, then how are you going to handle Scorpion? Are you going to be using his swords most of the time, or are you going to be using his fire ability, or are you going to be using this other demon apparition to fight your battles for you and use it in a strategic way to where you can have your opponent bouncing between you as Scorpion and then the demon that Scorpion is able to summon? And it's a really neat way to make you think of how to fight with these characters and strategize, because it's not like in the last game where every character had every kind of ability and you can simply just string together combos and practically just spam the living hell out of your opponent. This time the opponent kind of has a fighting chance against you, because if you choose to use a certain variation of a character that only has like one weapon, and you wanted to use that weapon along with like the gun that he or she uses, well, I'm sorry, but you're only going to be able to choose the variation that comes with the knives or the variation that comes with the guns, but not both. So you need to think about which variation you want to spend time with and practice and use, because you're not going to be able to use the other one with the guns. You can't have both things, and that therefore the opponents, should it be somebody online or locally and it knows that you're very experienced and gets intimidated whenever they want to fight you, now I feel like they have a fighting chance, because there's different variations to these characters, and gives you the ability to think that, okay, maybe with this variation of Raiden, I finally have a fighting chance. Now, being that these new variations are being introduced into this game, this also prompts the developers to have made some slight tweaks to the actual fighting style of some of these characters. I remember hearing, I think I was watching this either on a stream or on a YouTube Let's Play or something like that, but somebody was talking about how Scorpion felt just a little bit different than he did in the last game, and he noted that he noted that there were some changes made to his fighting style. Nothing too significant. I mean, he still had the Scorpion chain, you know, get over here, and basic and classic moves like that. But there were a couple of changes, like a different form of uppercut or a kick, something like that, something very minor like that, made to the character of Scorpion. And chances are, if a change like that was made to Scorpion, then chances are other changes have been made to some of the other characters on the roster. So some of these characters might feel a little bit different, but I think only hardcore Mortal Kombat players are going to notice that. And for some, that might be a little bit of an issue, but for most, I'm sure, we'll just look at this as a challenge and be like, okay, time to get used to a new fighting style. It may not be all that new and different, but it still has a few changes to that you're probably going to have to get used to should you be a Mortal Kombat veteran. And again, this keeps the series new and different every single time they make a new game. My only slight problem is that I feel like some of these brand new moves, they may have borrowed from their last game, Injustice Gods Among Us. In fact, some are clearly taken from that last game, and I honestly don't know how to feel about this. I feel like they were hitting the copy and paste button, and sometimes that just doesn't look right from developers. I mean, it's one of the issues I've been having with Call of Duty and how they would copy and paste their mechanics. I don't want NetherRealm to be going down that road as well. And there's some moves for some of these characters that I can clearly tell were from Injustice. Very good example, Reptile. He has this move in one of his variations where he is able to speed up and therefore slow down his opponent. The thing that he does is exactly the same as the Flash, where he like vibrates for a second there and he becomes faster, and therefore the opponent becomes slower. It's the exact same move, and I'm like, oh, NetherRealm, I really don't know how to feel about this. Fortunately, it blends in with some of these characters, but let's just hope it's not a continuing trend for NetherRealm. But you know what? I'm glad that they copied and pasted it from Injustice, the interactable environments. I love that they brought what really worked in Injustice over to Mortal Kombat, because it just felt right. It felt very appropriate to bring in these sections of the environments where you actually press the right bumper and you're able to interact with the environments and use them to your advantage, whether it be jumping off of cars or taking a branch like this and just knocking it over the head of your opponent. And that's awesome. And what I liked is that unlike Injustice, it doesn't really change, because most of these characters are, have some kind of supernatural power or whatever. So for the most part, every single item is going to be the same for your character, therefore leading to absolutely no confusion as to whether or not your character is going to simply just jump off a car instead of picking it up and throwing it like an Injustice. Here, your character is going to jump off the car no matter what. Sure, you wish to pick it up, but at least there's not going to be any confusion and you're not going to be thrown off. Plus, You get to pick up an old lady and throw it at your opponent. Best game ever. I'm kidding. You know that that's not what makes this game the best game ever. It's the very sadistic and gory and bloody fatalities that you love. That's what makes a Mortal Kombat game. All right, that's the one thing that keeps Mortal Kombat popular. And I'm not even joking around anymore. I'm not saying this in a sarcastic way. I'm being legit. This is why Mortal Kombat is still relevant today. It's the fatalities. All right, people are making reaction videos to them on YouTube. They become somewhat of a viral hit, and I feel like that's what's keeping the franchise going. Sure, sometimes I feel like they push it to the limit, and it doesn't really upset me or turn me away, but I can see why it would turn away some people. But nevertheless, the X-rays from the last Mortal Kombat game, as well as the classic brutalities and fatalities from all of Mortal Kombat, are back again in this game, and they're awesome. Sure, some are kind of meh, some are not bad, but they feel very routine fatalities, you know, like somebody gets their head ripped off and then they show it off to the camera and then that's it. And I'm like, okay, we've seen that plenty of times. But then there's others that are just so ridiculous and over the top. See, they're so crazy, I can't even talk. But they are so nuts that not only would I execute them over and over because they won me over after every single time I would execute them, but like I just stated, even though they didn't upset or make me nauseous, I can definitely see why others will look at it and be like, no, I'm done. I can't look at this. And that might be an issue for some, but it's definitely not an issue for the guy who waited at 9 o'clock on a very chilly night here in the high desert in front of a Best Buy store to get the copy of his game early. Okay? Now, much like the previous Mortal Kombat games, you got plenty of modes to keep you busy, and I'm not going to go into all of them because you already know most of them. It's the classic stuff that comes with a Mortal Kombat game, and also because this review has gone on way too long. But I'm just going to go over them really quickly. You got the story mode, like I already mentioned. You got the single fight. You got the versus, whether you want to fight somebody locally, you know, right next to you, a second player, or going online and fighting other people online, whether it be on through a single fight, or through a King of the Hill match, or a Survivor match, or stuff like that. You also got the towers here. You got the classic tower, where you got 10 opponents, and then at the end you got the final boss, where after defeating it, you got this little concept art cutscene that is very reminiscent of not just the last Mortal Kombat game, but also Injustice. I mentioned that in that review, so you guys already know what you're in for. And again, you got all the basic modes that you would come to expect from a Mortal Kombat game. However, there's a couple that I think I need to mention ever so briefly. First of all, this time we only got 2 challenge modes carried over from the last Mortal Kombat game. You know that test your luck, test your might, test your sight, all of those. This time you only got 2. You got test your luck, in which random modifiers are applied to the match, making things very, very different and very, very weird, but also challenging and fun, especially when you're fighting other people online with that type of fighting match. You know, you got these random modifiers where you got, especially the one where the world tilts back and forth. God, it actually made me dizzy, but again, it was very, very fun, especially with somebody else online. And you also got test your might, where you have to break these objects by mashing the buttons on the face buttons on your controller and pressing one of the triggers at the correct moment when you're doing all this at the same time, and you advance, and of course every time you advance it gets harder and harder and harder. And those are the only 2 challenge modes that carried over from the last game. You don't got test your sight. You don't got the one where I think you had to hit like some barrels or something like that, and that's fine because those did feel like filler. I mean, they were fun, but you didn't really need them, so I'm kind of glad that they made the sacrifice to get rid of those 2 and just keep the base, the classics, you know. Test your might, where you have to break objects, and test your luck by adding random modifiers, whether they be randomly generated by the computer in the game or by yourself through custom combat, where you get to apply those modifiers on your own. You also got this thing called the Faction War, which is this thing that gets introduced right when you boot up the game. It asks you what faction you want to join. You got the Lin Kuei, you got the Black Dragon, the White Lotus, the Special Forces, and the Brotherhood of Shadow, pertaining to these really powerful factions from the Mortal Kombat universe. And essentially this is NetherRealm's way of trying to bring the Mortal Kombat community get together. You join a faction, and every time you complete a set amount of challenges that appear either daily or weekly or just overall, you gain points for that faction. And of course, it's kind of like this, little group thing where one faction will remain in the lead, but then if you give your faction enough points, maybe they'll be in the lead. And this is like a little thing to build a sense of rivalry amongst the community of Mortal Kombat, but at the same time bringing them together. Nothing too special, but I think it's rather neat. And returning once again, you got the Krypt, with a K, in which you go in there, you waste all your money on these gravestones that unlock little bonuses from the game, whether it be bonus concept art, music tracks, character profiles, stuff like that. But of course, the things that you're always looking for in the Krypt are the bonus skins for your character that you get to use, but more importantly, the fatalities. You get to unlock bonus fatalities and brutalities throughout the Krypt by spending money on these tombstones. Now, of course, you mainly go into the Krypt gambling, because sometimes you can spend all of this money, like 10,000 combat coins, on a gravestone and unlock it, only to just get a little bit of a perk, whether it be an easy fatality or be the ability to skip a fight on a ladder match, or just some concept art that you really don't care about. But then you can go to another tombstone and spend only like 400 or 500 combat coins, and you get a bonus fatality. So ultimately, it's how you choose to spend your money that it matters in the Krypt. But this time, they decided to make the Krypt a bit more involved and very fun, because it almost feels like a dungeon crawler. You're navigating through this graveyard, unlocking these different bonuses, but at the same time you need to look out for creatures that can attack you, which have appeared in prior Mortal Kombat games, but this time adding the quicktime event mechanic, which here feels fine because it's a different thing. It's not it's not like you're actually fighting the opponent, which you're supposed to do in the story mode. But here, you got this creature popping out that's supposed to scare you, but they added a little quicktime event prompt that if you execute at the right moment, you can actually kill the creature and gain some more combat coins through that. And I think that's rather neat. That's a really neat little mechanic that they integrated. And at the same time, you also got these little obstacles throughout the Krypt where you need to traverse this little passage that can only be unlocked by this weapon or this item that you have to discover throughout the graveyard. It almost becomes like a dungeon crawler, and I think that's a rather innovative way to make the Krypt new again for this new version of Mortal Kombat. In conclusion, oh god, I feel like I've been talking forever. Anyways, I guess it's obvious that I really did enjoy this game. There's so many things about it that are awesome, whether it be the classic stuff that has been brought back throughout the generations of Mortal Kombat, but or the brand new stuff that they're bringing to the table with this newest version of Mortal Kombat that is supposed to be edgy and very much in with the newest generation of combatants and this newest generation of consoles. And I feel like I feel like a broken record here, but it really feels like the people over at NetherRealm look at this franchise and want to keep it alive by doing things with it, trying new things instead of just running it into the ground with the same old thing every time they bring us a new game. No, that's not the way they think, and I think that's something that really needs to be appreciated about this game and about how they constructed this game. Plus, pulling people's intestinal tracts out of their system is always amazing, or cutting off their face and being able to see the tongue wiggle inside and the brain just spill in front of them is satisfying, at least to me. And I'm demented, okay? Granted, much like almost every fighting game that I've come across, kind of loses its steam after about maybe a week of playing it, but that's almost every fighting game. Not just this one, but every fighting game after about a week of playing it and trying out every single mode. And sure, every fighting game is going to come with its own set of problems, and Mortal Kombat X is no exception. But it's definitely a game that after putting it away for some time, you're definitely going to want to go over to a friend's house and pull the ultimate fatality on them. And this game is just another fine example and another fine way to be able to do that, and especially on the newest generation of consoles and this brand new way of playing Mortal Kombat. So for that, I give Mortal Kombat X a high 8 out of 10. I definitely recommend it for anybody who has loved Mortal Kombat from the very beginning. And sure, you may have some issues with the roster or the way a character looks or their newest fatality, but it's still Mortal Kombat at its heart, right before it gets pulled out. So let me know what you guys thought of Mortal Kombat X if you have played it, but if you have not and would like to purchase the game after watching my review, then be sure to use the link in the description below. It would really help me out a lot. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
Get over here!